Thanks for watching the video today. Today we're going to take a look at this book, Fudge. I hope you can see on the side here the 10th anniversary edition, and it's by Stephen O'Sullivan and other contributors and artists. And we'll take a look inside the book, especially so you can see some of the art and other things inside there. Originally published in 2005, it's about 320 pages, but you can still get it. So what is Fudge? Fudge is a free RPG. And it started out as the freeform universal do-it-yourself gaming engine, but nowadays they just call it Fudge. They don't go back to that acronym anymore. And many of you may know that Fudge is the inspiration for the game Fate. Fate is actually an implementation of Fudge, although it's grown and it brings its own things to the table. And I would like to do a review of Fate in a later video. Now, Fudge is part RPG and part toolkit. Most games, you buy the rulebook, you learn the rules, and you play it. Fudge is a little bit different. Fudge is a way for you to build your own game. So let's take a look inside the book. We'll talk about the dice mechanics and the kind of things you're going to see inside the book. So let's take a look at the book itself, and we're not going to page through all 320 pages because that'd be just too much and the video would be several hours long. So this is Fudge. It's a hardbound book, and you probably can't see, but it is sewn. So this is not just glued together. It's going to last, I think, a long time. Now let me show you in here a few things. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the whole book because it's just too much. So here's something. It's OGL. It's Open Gaming License. If you include this, you can write adventures and versions of Fudge or your own game based on Fudge. So that's really great. And table of contents. But what I really want to show you, and it's going to be hard to see here because it's a little bit small, is the ladder. What makes Fudge unique, and I don't know if it was the first game ever to do this, but it was one of the early ones. It uses words rather than numbers. Now, to make life easier, some people do prefer numbers, and Fate uses that. But for example, all your skills and attributes and things are ranked from terrible, poor, mediocre. Then you get fair and good and great and superb. Now, this may not seem like a lot of levels, but you can always add levels above. You can add levels in between if you want something a little bit more granular. That's absolutely fine. Like I said, Fudge is a toolkit. Now, Fudge uses special dice. And let me show you some here. And the reason I'm showing you these is because you can buy Fudge dice or you can make them. I just took an ordinary dice and two sides I painted red, two sides I painted green, and I left the other two white. So how does this work? When you roll Fudge dice, let me see if I can get them to roll near the book here. Okay, let me move them so you can see them. There we go. So let's see what I got. I got a white. That's a 0. Take that out. Green is good. Red is bad. So these two cancel. So I'm left with -1. So if somebody was had good aim, let's say, they go down 1. Now their shot was only fair. And you can compare that to an opponent's defense number, sort of like an armor class, or you could make it an opposed roll. There's different ways to do it. So now they also say, well, what if you don't have Fudge dice? You can use a 2d6 or a 3d6, and then they give you a little chart here to do the conversion. If you don't want to do it that way, another simple option is d6 minus d6. So you get maybe a red and a blue dice, and the blue is positive and the red is negative. You roll them and you subtract them. Now that'll give you a little bit broader range, but you still get pretty close. Fudge is, because you're rolling multiple dice, Fudge is very zero-centered. So a lot of the time, your roll is going to be very similar to your attribute. So it's not quite as swingy as a D20 game. So let's roll them again here. Okay, like here, I got a red and a green, and they'll cancel, 2 zeros. So if I was a great shot, well, I got a great shot. Now, some people may not like that, and some people might. One thing that it is good for is it makes it easy to kind of, for the game master or dungeon master, to control things, because you can really set the difficulty numbers and know that they're often going to get pretty close to their skill. Then it gets into, well, how do you make a character? How broad do you want your skill list to be? Do you want very broad skill categories, like maybe animal handling? Or do you want to split that into, okay, grooming and feeding and breeding, or riding, driving, care? You can get as specific as you want. And some of the examples in here are very specific. Now, a lot of the art is, I see it looks like clip art from public domain. And let's see some other things that you get in here. Like I said, the book itself is too long. A lot of gray boxes where they give you a lot of different alternatives. Now, this art looks like it was created just for the book. So there is some specific art. A lot of the science fiction and superhero art. There's a superhero. Looks like it was specifically created for the book. But some of the other stuff, like this, looks like Robin Hood. It was probably public domain art, that they found out there somewhere, or clip art that they purchased. So you can play diceless. It gives you that as an option. Bunch of different combat options. Here's another more specific artwork created for the book. And so on. Now let's get into some other things that are interesting in here. Let me flip ahead. It gives you a lot of sample characters. Some of them are quite long. Like, I don't know myself, I think I might go with a little bit shorter skill list, but this shows you if you like a lot of, more specific skills. But you can see this one up here is like a half page, and it's a little bit shorter. And I think you could even go shorter than that if you wanted. So it gives you a lot of example characters. Gives you a ton of examples for skills, gifts, and faults. So these are good because, like, if you need to give somebody like a supernatural power, maybe they have ESP. But it also encourages you to give your characters faults that maybe the game master can use to help build stories out of. And Fate certainly built on that idea of these gifts and faults. Now, if you don't want to do all this work. You don't want to have to go through and build totally your own game system. They give you some ready-made examples. There's Fantasy Fudge. There's another one in here. Now, the Fantasy Fudge, if you wanted to do more of a Dungeons & Dragons style. And there is a sample adventure in here. It's only a couple pages, but I played through it once just to see how it works, and it worked fine. Gives you a lot of magic systems. Now, there's this 5-point fudge. That's one build of fudge that you can use, and that's included here in the book so that you don't have to always start from zero if you want to just use something a little more ready-made. Degrees of magic, psionics, superheroes. You can see there's kind of a Wolverine type or Sabretooth type character they have the drawing of here. And a lot of these others were articles, I think, written by different contributors. But they put them in here. Cybernetics, net running, I guess if you want to run like a cyberpunk type game, which was probably big, when this book was first come out. Some vehicles, including spaceships and helicopters and things like that. Dogfighting, if you want to do a Star Wars type space dogfighting or World War II dogfighting. Weapons and armor. And like I said, I'm not going to get into everything. Martial arts options. If you want to do a martial arts types games. Fudge Fu, which I guess is, again, Kung Fu. So there's a couple different martial arts systems. And then they give you some combat tables and a really nice character sheet here at the end for you. So that's a look at the book. Let's talk about who should buy the book. I think if you're a person interested in designing your own RPG, this is a great purchase. Absolutely, it's a very good purchase. Even if you're not interested in writing a Fate or a Fudge type game. If you look at the bonuses, they really run from about -3 to +3. So if you're writing a game for a different system, hey, that -3 to +3 range sounds an awful lot like the bonuses in most standard D20 games, Dungeons & Dragons, for low-level characters. So if you don't like this, you could, the fudge dice, or you don't want to mess around with the fancy dice, you could use 2d6 and just add the stat number and then just have some target numbers. You could use a d10. Now that's going to be a little swingier because d6 averages to 7, but the d10 has a little bit more swingy range, or even a d20. So if you want to design even with a different system, Fudge will help you. Even if you say, well, I want to do a percentile, Fudge gives a lot of examples and thoughts. Well, how specific do you want your attributes to be? How specific do you want your skills to be? Do you want your skills linked to your attributes or not? So a lot of good ideas for game designers in here. So it's a great overview of how to think through it. Now, the Fudge system itself is a little bit granular. So it does require, if you're going to use the system, to be real careful not to set your difficulty levels too high, at least initially. Because if you're setting them way above what the players can get, it is going to be hard to reach that. So I think it's one thing, it's not as hard as it would seem. You just, for earlier encounters in an adventure, maybe you set them more like to fair. And then as they get tougher and tougher opponents or tougher and tougher challenges, then maybe you start to bump up to good or great. So I think that actually makes it easier for the GM when you're designing an adventure. But you just have to keep that in mind, that you don't want to set them too high, because there's not as many, it is a little more granular and a little more zero-centered, less swingy than a D20. Now, maybe you want to try Fudge, but you don't want to spend any money and you don't want to buy this book. That's fine. There's some options out there. There's one called Easy Fudge, which is, I think it's about 30 pages. It's a free PDF you can download. A lot of free stuff available at Fudge RPG, and I will put the link down below for you. And like I said, you can easily make your own dice. Just get some cheap D6s, and you could use acrylic paint or enamel paint or even nail polish and or even a Sharpie and write on them or color on them, and you can make them. And there's so many free dice roller apps there, including one on the Fudge website. So you don't have to spend a dime if you want to at least try it before you sink any money into the book. So what would I say in conclusion? Fudge is for tinkerers. It's a great option, though, for one-shots. Maybe you want to run a convention game or a one-shot game online, and you want to run Star Trek or Star Wars. Yeah, there's game systems out there. But for a one-shot, you may not want to spend 40 or 50 bucks on a really heavy, big hardback book. I'm not saying they're not good purchases, or if you have the money and you want to do that. But if you're only going to run it once, you may not want to sink that kind of money into it. Fudge is a great free way to run that game. And also, too, once you've kind of decided, all right, here's how I like to run Fudge. Here's how many sort of hit points or stress boxes I like, or here's how many Fudge points I like to give. Once you've decided on that, all you have to do is adjust maybe the skill list and maybe some of the advantages or aspects, and you could easily do a different genre. Once you've set it up for Star Trek, you could just adjust some things for a modern setting, or if you wanted to run a game like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Supernatural, it would be very easy to do. And last thing, and this is maybe a more philosophical thing, Fudge is a good reminder that rule books are not catechisms. You are absolutely free to adjust things and play the game that you and your players will enjoy. You can build it from the ground up and still have a good time. So it has really that indie spirit. So, in conclusion, there's some Sharp Mountain Games products. We have the link below if you'd like to help support the channel. I do thank you for watching. And if you'd like to like and subscribe, that's great. And I just give Fudge a try. You might be surprised. Maybe you've played it once before and it wasn't really great or it didn't quite work for you. Give it another try. You might really be pleasantly surprised. So go have your Fudge, but watch those cholesterol numbers.